Welcome to this edition of the Click and Pledges Fundraising Command Center podcast.
We are the team here, and this is our The Why series.
That's right, where we talk the why, the what, and the how for really effective fundraising in the Click and Pledge ecosystem.
And today we are continuing a pretty unique deep dive we started. We're exploring the entire donor experience, but through the lens of Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
It's a fascinating framework.
It is. We're essentially charting the donor's mythic journey, all the way from, realizing a problem exists to actually funding the solution.
And that's the big mission. If you joined us for part one, we really laid the groundwork by focusing on the call to adventure.
Right.
That's that initial moment. The story you share, maybe it's a powerful narrative like the baby shoes flash fiction we talked about. It creates what we call the emotional gap.
Or a kind of deep-seated pain for the potential donor.
Exactly.
Maybe we should quickly clarify the gap for anyone who's just jumping in.
Yeah, good idea.
It's that sudden, often really uncomfortable realization that your personal values, that we should live in a just world, a fair world, that they just don't align with the reality you've just presented.
So the donor sees the problem.
And instinctively feels this urge to bridge that gap.
They feel the call to action. But, and I think we both know this from years in the field,
Oh, absolutely.
feeling the call and answering the call are two very, very different things. The vast majority of potential heroes, our potential donors, they don't just leap into action.
Precisely. And that brings us right to the most frustrating and, arguably the most important stage of this whole journey.
Which is?
Refusal of the call.
Ah, yes.
This is that critical moment. It's when the donor ignores the pain you just showed them, or they shut down, or they just click away.
So our mission today in this deep dive is, I guess, twofold. First, to really understand the psychology behind that refusal.
The why.
The why. And second, to arm you with the narrative tools you need to dismantle those defenses and guide the donor forward. We want to go from the abstract barrier to the actionable fix.
I think when a donor refuses that invitation, that call to help, a lot of organizations assume they just failed to be empathetic enough.
Or that the donor just doesn't care.
Exactly. But based on all the research we've looked at, that is almost never the case.
So what we've learned from analyzing really successful campaigns is that this refusal shouldn't be seen as a lack of empathy at all.
No.
It's more like a powerful psychological defense mechanism kicking in. The problem, to put it simply, is just overwhelming scale.
That is the core driver. When the scale of a problem gets too large, the brain initiates a kind of self-preservation. This is the whole concept of psychic numbing.
Okay, let's spend some time here because this is where the real deep dive happens. Psychic numbing. It isn't just apathy.
Not at all.
It's the brain literally overloading its own emotional circuits. We're wired to respond and respond intensely to the suffering of one person.
Especially someone in our immediate, social orbit.
Right. But when that scale expands to the mass, to thousands or millions, our capacity for emotional processing just maxes out.
Think of it like a fuse blowing. The emotional centers in the brain, the ones you need for empathy and for action, they just shut down. It's to protect the whole system from collapsing under like an impossible weight of sadness.
So it's cognitive dissonance, really.
On a massive scale, yeah. It's your brain saying, I know this is terrible, but I can't fix it, so I have to stop caring about it.
What's so fascinating to me is the almost clinical precision of this shutdown. The research suggests it isn't just a vague feeling of, oh, that's too many people.
No, it's specific.
You recognize that the brain actually starts to check out right around a specific number.
And that threshold it's around the number 1,000.
Right.
Once you start talking about large-scale statistics beyond that, beyond what the brain sees as a manageable sort of tribal scale,
The emotional connection just fades.
and psychic numbing sets in almost immediately.
That is such a powerful and specific detail for our listeners. I mean, the moment we start talking about 10,000 or a million,
You've lost them.
you stop speaking to the part of the brain that gives, and you start speaking to the part of the brain that calculates.
And calculation is the enemy of action. Emotion and analytical thought, they live in two completely different parts of the brain.
So you can't engage both at once.
Right. When we try to engage that analytical side with these massive, overwhelming statistics, we simultaneously suppress the emotional, empathetic response we need for giving. The analytical brain just says, this is too big, too expensive, my little contribution won't matter.
So if we're looking for the main villain in this part of the story, in the refusal of the call, We don't have to look any further than, and this is so counterintuitive for so many nonprofits,
Statistics.
We really suggest that you view statistics as the primary driver of the donor's refusal. They're like a psychological shield, keeping that pain, the gap, at a safe distance.
But that does raise a really important question, what I'm sure a lot of our listeners are thinking.
Go on.
I mean, isn't some scale necessary? We're trying to raise millions of dollars for these huge problems. How do we justify that budget if we only talk about one person?
That's a great challenge. And the answer, I think, is in the narrative structure, not the fiscal report. To fight psychic numbing, we have to internalize one really powerful principle. It's this piece of wisdom. I think it came from human rights campaigns.
If I look at the mass, I will never act.
If I look at the one, I will.
That's it. So the crucial pivot then is to stop talking about millions when you're asking for that first gift and start the discussion about one.
The numbers make it abstract.
And unreachable.
Yeah.
But the individual story makes the problem immediate, solvable, and personal.
That fundamental tension, the mass versus the one, that's exactly what dictates how we need to structure our appeals. Let's look at two different approaches.
Okay.
We recommend you really analyze the messaging that causes the refusal versus the messaging that actively overcomes it.
So let's take the bad example first, the one that causes the refusal. That's talking only about the mass.
Right.
So you might say in your appeal, more than 1 million children are experiencing food insecurity across the region.
1 million. That number is just so massive, the donor immediately triggers that psychic numbing.
Immediately. The analytical brain just jumps in and says, I can't solve this for 1 million kids, so my $50 won't make a dent. Why bother? The call is refused.
I remember early in my career, we put out this end-of-year report, huge numbers, detailing our reach, and the donation response was nothing. Zero.
Wow.
We had effectively used statistics against ourselves. We were so proud of the scale. But that same scale completely terrified our donors.
Okay, so now let's pivot to the good example, the one that overcomes the refusal because it focuses so intensely on the individual.
Using sensory detail.
Exactly. Using sensory detail to create a specific, grounded scene. We suggest pivoting to a narrative like this. 8-year-old Maria held her empty lunchbox tightly, knowing the only feeling sharper than hunger was the shame of not being able to focus on her math test.
That shift is everything, isn't it?
Everything.
You move from the cold world of statistics, which triggers numbing into this specific human experience, which triggers empathy and an action. You've overcome the refusal by giving the donor a single, manageable target.
Maria's hunger, Maria's shame, it's a victory the donor can actually achieve.
And what's really powerful about that, too, is how it shifts the identity of the nonprofit. This is where we stop thinking about fundraising as just marketing.
And start seeing it as a sacred invitation to a mythic journey.
A mythic journey. I like that.
I mean, in a myth, the hero is never fighting an abstract concept like statistical poverty.
No, the hero is fighting a clear, defined antagonist.
A villain. If we're asking the donor to be a hero, they need a villain to fight, not just a system to marginally improve. So to get the donor past the refusal.
We need to personify the problem.
Yes. We recommend you make the struggle feel immediate, dramatic. Give the donor a real villain to fight against.
And this villain can be more than just, a physical thing like hunger.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we just say a child is sad because they're cold, that's a passive state. The donor needs to feel like their donation is an active countermeasure, like a weapon against an active threat.
So we take that abstract issue, poverty, disease, whatever it is,
Bureaucracy.
and we turn it into an active, named force.
Exactly. We suggest reframing the narrative so the issue itself becomes the villain. So instead of focusing on the child's sad state, we frame it as an aggressive force, something like the hunger is attacking the child's future.
Or for systemic issues.
You might frame the opponent as the bureaucracy, which is actively blocking access to medicine. You could even personify inertia and say the apathy is stealing their hope.
That's a subtle but really profound reversal. You're turning these abstract forces into tangible antagonists. You're giving the donor's contribution a dramatic purpose. They aren't just donating to overhead. They are arming themselves against the bureaucracy. They're protecting Maria from the hunger.
And it connects right back to the root of the refusal. The refusal happens because the donor feels small and powerless against the scale of the problem.
All right.
But by shrinking the scope down to one person and personifying the issue into a specific attackable villain, You empower the donor again. You give them a clear, immediate objective.
Something they can actually achieve with their gift.
Exactly.
So if we synthesize all this, if we're recommending some actionable knowledge to take away from this deep dive on overcoming refusal, it sounds like it's two major shifts in how you create your narrative.
I think so. First, you replace numerical scale with narrative depth. Stop saying thousands and start detailing the immediate plight of Maria or John. Those little details of a single experience defeat psychic numbing.
And second, you replace those passive emotional states, sadness, discomfort, need, with active, dramatic antagonists. You have to give the donor a tangible entity to push back against, make the problem a villain.
Yeah. The refusal is just a temporary, natural block in the journey. Our job is to be the guides who dismantle those psychological defenses by replacing overwhelming stats with evocative details and passive descriptions with active villains.
That's fantastic clarity for this stage. So, we've issued the call in episode 1, and now we've broken down the refusal and convinced the hero, our donor, that the problem is solvable and that they have a clear target.
Right.
But the hero can't just run off into the wilderness alone.
No, a hero rarely ventures out without help. The next stage, which we'll get into in our next deep dive, is called supernatural aid.
Supernatural aid. That sounds like the cavalry arriving.
In our framework, it is exactly that. This is the stage that introduces the character who guides the hero through the problem. And in our fundraising structure, the nonprofit itself steps into this role. So the organization becomes the mentor, kind of like a Yoda or a Gandalf.
Exactly like that. The wise guide who knows the path and knows the enemy.
I see.
We recommend you frame your organization as that essential, knowledgeable guide who has navigated this treacherous path before and understands the true nature of the villain.
And most importantly,
the mentor provides the solution. The specific program or method that becomes the hero's weapon against the villain we just identified.
That's the ultimate reassurance, isn't it? Before they commit. The donor knows the problem is solvable from this deep dive, and in the next one, you show them how you specifically will help them solve it. You're giving them the tool they need.
It connects all the dots. The pain from episode 1, the solvable problem from episode 2, and now the professional guidance and solution in episode 3. We're building a really powerful, heroic narrative around the simple act of giving. This whole framework is it's such a powerful way to think about the donor experience from their perspective, making sure that path from interest to action is clear and motivational. Thank you for walking us through the deep psychology of the refusal of the call.
My pleasure. It really does transform what could be a transaction into a heroic act.
And for you, our listener, if you're looking for more information about this framework or any of the Click and Pledge products, please make sure to visit clickandpledge.com.
You can request a one-on-one training, a demo.
Yeah, whether you're a client already or just curious about how our platform can support your own heroic fundraising, just ask us. We will gladly get together with you to chat.
And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. That way you'll stay up to date with all the latest and greatest from the Click and Pledge Fundraising Command Center, including the next chapter in this series, Supernatural Aid.
And we'll see you then as we officially arm the hero for battle.